We've all heard some wacky stories in history, whether it be the Trojan horse and that whole ordeal, the Black Plague that wiped out and decimated a third of an entire continent's population, and a king from Great Britain who had 7 to 8 wives and divorced and killed many of them because they were partying too hard. I think some of these are more sad and depressing, but I prefer to look at the funny ones and the kind of silly, crazy ones, like Terrare, a man who was so hungry that he ate many live animals. So it all starts with a poor man named Terrare from France. His family was just him and his mom and dad, and as you can see from this right picture, he had really wide cheeks, and people say that he could hold 12 eggs and 6 eggs in both cheeks. And his stomach would get super wide whenever he ate, and then it would get like fleshy, like a person who underwent surgery, like fat reduction surgery. It would hang out like that and roll like that. And he got, obviously, because he was so hungry, at 17 he was able to eat a fourth of a cow in a single day. So his parents obviously couldn't take care of that, so they kind of kicked him out, and he was like a traveling performer for a little bit. He went around town and basically ate whatever he wanted, like whatever they wanted. He would eat rocks, trash, even live animals. And obviously that isn't good for the gut, so he ended up getting an intestinal blockage where they gave him the best and strongest laxatives in 1700s France, which I don't even want to think about what that looks like. But after that, they decided to run some tests on him. They gave him a meal for 15 people, and he ate it all and passed out on the table. And then the second trial they did with him was they gave him a live eel, and he crushed its head with his mouth and then ate it whole.
Ew.
Yeah. And they figured that he could be pretty useful in the War of the First Coalition, so they gave him a box, told him to eat it, and then he passed it 3 days later in a German prison cell. And it turns out it was nothing useful, so they just mock executed him, beat him severely, and sent him back to France, where, according to CVLT.com, he could have eaten a baby, like a 14-month-old baby. So then he got kicked out of the hospital and died a couple years later from tuberculosis-induced exudative diarrhea. And where one story ends, another one begins. And that's when I would like to talk about the luckiest person that I've ever heard of, Timothy Dexter. Timothy Dexter was a very, very wealthy man, but he started out he was a gold digger. I'm going to be honest, he was a gold digger. He married a rich widow, and obviously since he had a little bit of money, he decided, why not try to make more, obviously, as people do. So he spent the majority of his savings on the Continental Dollar. And if anyone knows what the Continental Dollar was, which I don't think many of you do, it was essentially just the first currency that we had that completely tanked because they kept on printing more and more of it off as soon as it started losing value. And he decided that because it was a Continental Dollar, so it must be worth something, he spent the majority of his savings getting as much of it as he could. And that should have been the end of him. That should have been the end of him, but the Constitution ratified that some of this money could be, like a fraction of the stuff he spent on the Continental Dollar, could be given back to him in bonds. And so he went, again, way up in value. So, as one would do, the aristocrats around him, the rich aristocrats, figured out he was so stupid that he would pretty much do anything, and they wanted to ruin him. So they said to send heating pans to the Caribbeans and to run coal to Newport, which Newport is one of the biggest suppliers of coal, especially back then. And both of these went out tremendously for him because in the Caribbeans, they didn't realize what heating pans were, so they just used them for molasses, so they got paid a lot more, which was the main supplier of molasses at the time. And then Newport, the workers who worked at the coal factories were on strike, so his coal came at the perfect time to raise his value again, which, is awesome. And according to Priceonomics, Dexter made his own epic, A Pickle for the Knowing Ones, where he ranted about politics, his wife, and many aspects of his life, which this is a page in the second edition of it, where he saw that people didn't like his language and didn't like his misspelling of words and no punctuation. Also, he just put an entire line of punctuation, said, pepper and salt it as they please, which is kind of cool. And right before he died, he had a mock funeral for himself to see who would come. And to his surprise, 3,000 people showed up, and he was going to say hidden at first. And then he realized that his widow wife didn't cry, so he came out and beat her with a stick. Which is pretty cool, but not very cool. And so, in conclusion, whether it be a voracious, hungry man who commits cannibalism, or an incredibly dumb but extraordinarily lucky person such as Timothy Dexter, there are many crazy and interesting stories that I think we can learn from history itself. And after hearing these unusual stories, hopefully you're thinking what I'm thinking, and I'm glad I'm not these guys. Thank you.